good to see everybody today. If you'll give us a couple of minutes, then we'll let other people show up, but it's really good to have everybody today. So you know, Jack is currently out in the field, and so he won't be joining us today. We can get started on talking about spring activities, activities that you would want to do with your students, be them kids or adults, good activities for spring. A quick thing before I start is that Jack wanted me to pass along one idea, and that's that he wanted to bring up the idea of spring not only being about change, but being about change at an accelerated rate. So the rate of change being significantly faster than it is in the other parts of the year. And I wanted to mention an idea I read about with this fun activities book that I'm very into, that talks about spring at the very beginning being a tug of war with winter.
I have to interrupt you, Yvea. I know Jacob Rodenberg.
You do?
He works at one of the camps that's here in Ontario. That's very funny that you have that book.
That's awesome.
He works at one of the camps that we held our Make Peace with Winter conference at this year, and he's always at the COYO conferences. I have that book as well. So that's all I wanted to say. That was so funny that you pulled that up.
Please tell him from me that I love his book. This is an awesome book. It makes me very happy. So yeah, one thing I really enjoy about this is that it talks about the beginning of spring being a tug of war with winter, where you'll begin to see signs of spring coming, but then winter will kind of go back in, and it will kind of go back and forth. But instead of sharing my own ideas, I want to hear from all of you. What are some ideas for spring activities that we can do with our learners in our nature journal? I think you're muted, Billie Jo.
Oh, I am.
And I see you raise your hand.
Yeah, is that better? Can you hear me now? So I like to do or think about things like, I guess in terms of rate of change, would just be to observe the species that are coming up, and sort of what that looks like and how fast things are growing, and doing some measuring and things like that. So you know how you on Facebook you always get those memories where it says like, this is what it looked like last year at this time, or 2 years from now. So the last couple of years, this time in March, we've had no snow, and we have a ton of snow right now. So it's really interesting. I was on a webinar last night, and somebody in Toronto was saying that their crocuses were already up, but here in Orangeville, which is only about 45 minutes north, we have so much snow that there's no way that the crocuses are showing up. So just being able to sort of look at, you know, who's starting to peek out of the soil is a really kind of fun one to see, or even looking at the rate in which the snow is melting is a great one too. So something that's kind of fun, that's showing that change between the seasons is kind of fun. So.
Absolutely, Billie Jo. And then I saw Amy Sides' hand first, and then I see Eleni. Amy, did you want to share?
I was just going to say that Melinda had a great Monterey Bay Nature Journaling Club this past Sunday, and we explored using the five, I hate to say the five senses, but you know, the five senses that are most commonly used in nature journaling, like hearing, smell, touch, taste, and vision, to explore the signs of spring. And that was really cool, because if you're like really concentrating on how things smell or what you're hearing, you're being right in the moment right now. It's hard to be thinking about, you know, your grocery list when you're trying to hear like all the different birds around you. So I thought that was a really neat program that she did this past Sunday. And I thought that was a great idea that I plan to use with some of my kids.
I think that's an awesome activity to do, to look at the five senses like that, because then after a while you can also begin to associate different things that maybe you don't find other parts of the year with that bit of spring, or just like or maybe certain things wind up becoming common with change in general. But I love that it's so specific, because then you can kind of go in and look at each of these things. And then if you get overwhelmed, then you can just focus on one of the senses or two.
True. Yeah, I think with kids, I would probably take it like maybe one per journaling session, so they can really focus in on that. And it's also fun to imagine that you're like describing what spring is like here to people that live around the world where it may be completely different. And that kind of brings like the ordinary, like, yeah, the dogwoods always bloom this time of year. Anything that seems ordinary to you might be completely different to someone around the world, or even, a few states north or south. And that's really fun to do.
I love that. Different versions of spring all over the world. And then right now it will be the other way around for folks who live in the Southern Hemisphere. Instead of spring, they'll be going more into autumn. And so it's kind of fun to see, like, it's almost, I wonder if it would look a little bit like the reverse of what we experience, or I don't know. But I love that. Different ways of spring all over. Thank you, Amy. And then I see Eleni's hand. I'm gonna add you in.
Yeah. And hi, everybody. Great to see everyone. I was taken by one of the first things you said, Yvea, that Jack had talked about change versus or compared to change at an accelerated rate. So I just am reflecting on that and curious to think about whether change is really changing, or like, is change happening really at an accelerated rate, or does change appear to be happening faster because we have tools, certain tools that can capture more moments in a change? So I'm thinking, 100 years ago, someone had, a camera and they took a picture of a flower bud, every so often or whatever. I think, so you get what I'm getting at. So there's that aspect of accelerating change. And I think also that social media has impacted in positive, but also very negative ways in the feeling of things constantly changing. So I just wanted to throw those out, not so much as a finished thought, but I found it very compelling to consider what it means for change to be happening at an accelerated rate. That I just hadn't considered that phrase before. So I'm glad to now have that to sort of wrestle with in a way.
I think that's a fabulous question about that's a wonderful way of double checking as well, whether is this actually happening, or is it just our perspective or our perception of it? So
and our tools, and that we have tools, so it's our cognitive and subjective, and we have different measurement. We can measure things. So I'm sorry, you were also saying, yeah.
So speaking on the subject of tools, what would be some ways of using tools to see, is it a matter of using the tools consistently over time, would you say?
Well, I'm thinking, and I'm coming at this as an anthropologist and an artist rather than a scientist. So I'm thinking of, phenology maps that people make. And I think it would be interesting, or grids or circles, to invite our students, ourselves, to track something over time, maybe for 1 month. And you'd have to wait a year to track it again and see, is that plant actually, is it life cycle, fewer days, more days, depending on various factors. So that's my sort of close to the ground way into it, but I'd be really interested to hear what others, would suggest, especially those more scientifically oriented or traditional scientifically oriented.
I see. I'm going to call on Kate in just a second. I wanted to read a comment in the chat that I think Rebecca was responding directly to you, Eleni, if that's okay, Rebecca, that I read? Okay. It says, so Rebecca's comment says, I think it's seasonal. The change of light/day speeds up around the equinox, whereas in the solstices, it doesn't change much over a long span of time. So not just the perception of change, but she also really enjoys your question. So then light per day changing. And so that would be fun to really look at over time, look at the places where the sun rises and sets, look at the exact azimuth, look at how many hours in the sky, look at also what is it called? What the zenith of it is, what the zenith of the trajectory. So like what's the highest point in the sky that you see it at, the number of daylight hours. Also makes me think of something that Anne's brother had done with us once when he came and visited Jack's class. And he talked about the sun that he observes. And I think it was Antarctica, and the way that it doesn't, you would think, I can't remember exactly how it goes, but you would think that the solstice means a particular thing in terms of sunrise, sunset, and the highest point in the sky. But it winds up being a bit different in reality, in the sense that that might be the day that has the most, I think it's daylight hours, but that the sunrise and the sunset times continue to change, and that they're not always, I wish I could explain this better. Maybe while Kate goes, I'm going to see if I can find the link to the video where he talks about this, because I like the subject. And thank you, Eleni. And here, I'm going to go now to Kate. There we go.
Yeah, that's funny, because that's what I was going to talk about. Is one of the assignments I had in a class one time was to track the sunrise and sunset. And it was really fascinating to find that it doesn't, like, it's not this perfectly linear up and down sort of, like you expect this kind of really even curve of both the sunrise and the sunset changing, like expanding and contracting. And it doesn't happen quite like that. Like the sun keeps rising later, even after the winter solstice each day. And then it finally gets to a point where it starts rising earlier. And then, and it's the same thing with the summer solstice. So like the sun keeps, anyway, it's like, it's not intuitive, and it's kind of, I thought it was such a dumb exercise when we had to do it in high school, until I started seeing that. And then I got really excited, and I was the only one in class being like, oh my gosh, it doesn't change the way you think it would. So something as simple as just like looking up the charts of sunrise and sunset and recording them each day. I really am interested in recording the angle of the sun as it comes through, because we have these two mountains outside of our window. And I've noticed right on the equinox, it tends to, like right around the equinox, it tends to shine directly into my eyes at dinner time. It's setting right then. And it was during the, so I'm going to try to journal. I was actually in Japan though, the past week, and it was very, very interesting to see springtime in a different climate, one that does get a true winter, rather than, we don't, here in Hawaii, it's kind of, we have two seasons. There's the hot and the rainy season. And so for me, spring is just kind of transitioning out from like the rainy season. And it's actually kind of, for me, it's always a little sad. It feels more like autumn did in, when I lived on the East Coast, because, we have whales visiting, we have, all the, the migrating birds over winter here. We get the surf is awesome over the winter. Like we've had some just amazing days. And we have these just like perfect weather days, and just, I love winter here. And the summer is just hot and miserable. We don't have AC. And so you're kind of always hiding from the sun, and you're inside actually a lot more. And so for me, it's kind of this like, trying to like grasp onto like the last little bit of like the really rainy, what did I not plant? I actually plant things in the fall because they grow better over the winter. It's not the heat stress, and they get more rain. And so, for me, it's like a very, it's kind of more like people in like, I imagine Australia feeling of like right now, of just kind of like, oh, okay. Like, so kind of for me, like journaling my feelings and emotions throughout it, and kind of, doing that. But it was really neat in Japan watching like all the buds, the cherry blossoms were starting to bloom. And so comparing the rate of change, because apparently like this is not a time that cherry blossoms would usually be blooming in Tokyo, but with climate change, they are blooming earlier. So that's this bittersweet sort of emotion. But what was fascinating was that there were certain trees that were blooming and other ones that weren't. And it was very like, oh, I wonder why that is. And, you know, I just am curious too. Like, I'm like, I wonder if other places you have trees coming into bloom at different rates, you know, if they're slightly different species or something, even though they look really similar. So those were some ideas. Oh, color maps is a great one for this time of year to kind of chronicle that rate of change. But yeah, I love, you know, thinking about it globally, just because, you know, as I said, like our experiences are different here. You know, it's more saying goodbye to all the, you know, to the whales and things, and to the perfect weather that we've been getting, or, you know, the rain too. But I kind of love it when it rains here. Yeah. Ocean changes too. Oh yeah, ocean changes are really, really huge, and really, yeah. Goodbye to the whales. They overwinter here. They give birth out here, and they actually don't eat the whole time that they're here. There's no phytoplankton, so they just come here. They mate and they give, and they give birth to the young, and then they go back up to Alaska. So for our honeymoon, and we went up to Alaska, and the part of it was to be able to see the whales, and be like, oh, it's the same whales that we saw down here. So yeah, so kind of connecting, you know, the species and how they move and how, you know, those patterns are is really interesting. I see a question about color maps. I know I've been talking for a little bit. Can I answer that one? Yeah, so I've been seeing there's been a lot of nature journalists. There was somebody who did the color spot. I saw that was being, a lot of people were doing, so they just took a regular calendar and then made a color spot for each day, like chose a color for the day. There's also a color spot for an individual journaling day where you, there's like a lot of, you know, different ways you can do circles. You can just do like a color quilt. I know somebody has put forward too, where you kind of just make like a little square and make a grid and then kind of chronicle what colors that you see in the area. So just kind of focusing on, not even on like the shape or the bloom or anything, it's just like what colors you're seeing and how that changes, you know, throughout, you know, the weeks or months that you're doing it. Yeah. Okay.
I'm loving all of your ideas. It sounds like you have a lot of things that make you really excited. Oh, take care, Rebecca. It sounds like you've got a lot of things that get you really excited to look out for, and a lot that you observe when you're seeing the spring. So it's exciting to hear all of your ideas. Yeah, color maps, those are excellent ways of like seeing if the shades change from the winter to the spring. And maybe like, I think of that as being really clear when you're from a place that has snow, but maybe those of us who don't live in snowy places will be surprised too by how the color palettes will change. I saw Lisa saying how many shades of green. Yeah, maybe different, like maybe there's more of a variety of green at certain times, or maybe certain greens disappear during times of the year. That'd be fun to look at. So color maps, different bloom times differing between years, like Billie Jo was saying as well. In fact, I was going to show, there's this particular book that I've been trying to use, although I'm really bad at sometimes being consistent, called The Naturalist's Notebook by a couple of different folks, Nathaniel Wheelwright and Bernd Heinrich. And the idea with this one is for those who like phylogeny and keeping track of things long-term, you get an entire year-long calendar, but it offers you the ability to do 5 years. So that way you can compare February 1st of this year to, and then next year, and then the year after, and the year after, and the year after. And then it's easier to see, for example, if you're somebody who keeps track of the weather, and I've heard people saying that the snow is different, like Billie Jo was saying, then you can say, oh, we've been having, like, this is a time of year where last year we didn't get rain, but this year we're getting it, and then next year without the rain again. And so sort of seeing the changes over time, especially because we're looking, it sounds like, at not just rates of change, but also changes over long term because of possible things like global climate change or just years being weird. So that can be kind of a fun way maybe to do it. Oh, thank you, Amy. I saw Amy put the name in. Awesome. and so then, like what you were saying about the surf and noticing the surf and how that changes, like you get the fantastic storms during the winter, or maybe you get the tang tides, and then during the spring that might be different. And I've seen folks mentioning about like what you were talking about, the whales being there over winter but then leaving during the spring. And I'd noticed earlier in the chat folks have been talking about birds, and birds coming in who aren't normally there. And then and so I love looking at the different animals that might be changing over time, and coming in and coming out. Oh, go ahead.
Can I say something quick about the birds? Is it's also a fantastic time to do like the citizen science. Like I know that there's like there's some bird counts. We have one locally, like we're trying to do a bird count and keep track of like a very specific species, about when how many are still here that were, you know, arrived earlier, and then how many on what date exactly that they leave, like what's the last date that you see them on. So yeah, just as like a note, if you can find any, if you like birding, it's really fun also being able to catalog and like participate in sort of, you know, like the community science aspect of that.
That's an awesome thing to encourage, that we get involved in doing those kinds of things, especially because who else goes on to All About Birds sometimes and reads things about different species? So I've been going on and I've been finding a few notes for certain birds that say that they're very common, but that are experiencing sudden declines. Birds that you may be like, maybe certain ones I might take for granted, certain ones some of us might take for granted. I think that the recent one, mind you, I'm still a beginning birder, so I'm not really sure. It's the one warbler that has the black toupee. I don't remember which one that is though, but it's the one with the black toupee, and apparently it's been having some kind of a decline, and so that's kind of worrisome. So it's good to have to do the citizen science stuff, because it is helping to keep track of these changes, especially for the ones that we might be taking for granted and thinking, oh, this one is common, it's always around. But then maybe the stuff that we're doing, like taking the data combined with everybody else taking the data, shows us a different picture than we think. American gold, I think it was the Wilson's warbler, although now I'm wondering about the American goldfinch as well, and I want to check on that one. But yeah, I think it was the Wilson's warbler, so thank you, Jim.
And American goldfinch also.
That one's also declining?
Yeah, yes, because it's here in New Jersey. And I read an article about it the other day. It just occurred to me.
Okay, that's good to know that one, ones we take for granted, are declining. And I'm seeing Billie Jo mentioning animal changes in behavior. And I saw earlier Lisa talking about vernal pools. Did I get everything that you were saying, Kate? I want to make sure thank you. Sorry, and I apologize if I'm jumping around a little bit today. My home is chaotic, and I want to make sure I didn't miss what people were saying. I'm gonna call on Jim, and then we'll see what else people are saying. So here we go, Jim.
Hi, these are more things that I do personally. My journaling teaching is pretty sporadic. I do workshops occasionally in libraries and such, but a couple of things that I always hit every year. There's a raven's nest locally that last year I went, and this year I went. I'll try and go again, and just kind of record what they're doing. There's a spot where you can sit about 1,000 yards away or so and watch them kind of coming and going, which was a lot of fun. I kind of dropped the ball in that I didn't think to time things. It would have been a much more professional sort of approach if I could say, well, stayed away, instead of fudging it like, yeah, the raven left the nest, flew over to its mate, hung out for a little while, and then went back, you know. And then the second time it didn't stay away as long, but I just didn't have it to put the numbers down. But another thing that's an annual rite of spring is here in the East, the woodcock come back and have their courtship at dusk. So I do field trips with our local Audubon Society, and you know, that's always very popular trip. Last year we had to run a couple of them, but that's kind of an East Coast thing. But anyway, I guess to sum it up, bird nest, if you know of a bird that reliably nests, you can find bald eagles. There's a great horned owl near here that's been using the same nest for several years in a row. So sometimes you can pick up on these things. I would love to take groups around to these. It's just that the teaching I do is usually like on site somewhere. You know, perhaps getting a group out would be an idea to do sometime.
One thing I love about what you're saying is that you're saying you do field trips to check out like the woodcocks and whatnot. That's excellent for folks who might be beginning birders or who don't know about how to look for them. Because instead of just being told, oh, you know, birds are changing, go out in the field and find it, you're actually showing them how to look for the birds. So I think it's really awesome that the field trips are a thing that you do. So that way they go out with somebody who is experienced in how to look for these things.
Actually, I don't know why I didn't think of doing this sooner, but I may try and organize it. You know, usually nature journaling is at a specific venue that the teaching that I do, like a library, that's most of it, or a nature center. But it would be fun to maybe have some organization that I could get a group together with outside of you know, for beginners. I will have to think about that.
Do you ever work with any of the local libraries? I know, at least here in San Francisco, a lot of the libraries will try to put out community activities, and they're really willing to partner with different organizations or people in order to get more folks access to various events.
Yeah, no, I do that with sometimes on my own. I teach art classes or workshops, and sometimes with the local Audubon Society, we, you know, go around to all the libraries in the county and do presentations. And occasionally I do nature journaling things. I have one coming up in April. But I'm thinking of what you were, I don't know, something you said reminded me of something, but now it's fled my mind. I'll think of it later when it's too late, I'm sure.
No worries. Thank you, James. Or Jim, sorry, I say James, my name is Jim. Did anybody else have anything, any other ideas? I'm seeing some really awesome, let me take a look here. I'm seeing some awesome amphibian appreciation in the chat. I'm seeing, let's see here. I'm seeing Amy mentioning that in Alabama, the best vernal pools and the mating salamanders and frogs are calling in February. And I think it's awesome that you can pinpoint that that's a February thing. And then Billie Jo saying that it's big news in Orangeville? Orangeville, okay, cool. In Orangeville, when the wood frogs start to call, and that it happens even when there's snow on the ground. And I agree with Aisha, that's cool. And then stalking the fetid adder's tongue in February and taking her first fetid sniff is one of the yearly rituals. I love that, Aisha. I love that you get excited about that, about the first fetid sniff. But that's like that's visceral. It makes you feel like this is February. Like instead of this is Sparta, you would say this is February. So I love that. Yeah, I agree with Kate, delightfully gross. And I see that Lisa is saying that they're just starting in Massachusetts, the frogs. So I'm loving this amphibian appreciation. Do any of you ever take either your kiddos or other kiddos or friends or anybody out to look at these with you, be they the vernal pools or the amphibians? That's awesome. I'd love to hear from folks. What are some of the reactions that you get when you show people? Oh, I see Billie Jo raising her hand. Go for it.
Oh, I was just going to write in the chat, vernal ponds, like we call it critter dipping. That's a huge program here at the field centers, especially at the site that I'm at, because we're actually on a wetland. So we have a bog, we have several vernal ponds, and then we actually have Shaw's Creek that runs this part of the back. So coming up, these are huge programs for us. And then we do frog walks as well, because in behind, not that you can see, but there's a forest just right over here. And because we're on 200 acres of land here at the field centers. So it's awesome. And so we're coming into that. We were just talking yesterday and today about getting prepared for spring programming. And that is insects, amphibians, and all aquatic beasts of sorts. And it's my favorite season. because you get to see all of the macroinvertebrates, and you get to time what's happening. So when we first go out, we'll start to see the fairy shrimp. And fairy shrimp are a really interesting one that they actually, their eggs kind of overwinter in the mud, and then they kind of come back to life, and then they kind of go away. And we are thinking, we were looking at their sensitivities, and they're sort of sensitive. So we're wondering if they're a little bit sensitive to temperatures as well. So as the vernal ponds warm up, they tend to go away. Then we start to see like a big increase in caddisfly larvae, and we start to see predaceous diving beetles kind of coming up to the surface a little bit more. And then we'll start to see mosquito larvae. So we'll see the mosquito larvae and we'll be like, okay, it's starting. And then you'll start to see the tadpoles kind of hatch, and then you'll watch the mosquito larvae go into pupa form, and then you know that it's coming, that they're going to hatch soon, and that it's going to be chaos of sorts once down by the pond, because then we'll just be eaten alive by mosquitoes. So it's really cool to watch that and have that conversation with the kids, like as we're sort of going through it. April, May, sort of beginning part of May are fantastic times because mosquitoes are still in the pond. And then May into June is where you don't want to be anywhere near the back ponds without being in like full, you know, hazmat mosquito wear. Otherwise you're getting eaten alive. So it's really interesting to just sort of watch that go. But we'll get salamander babies here as well. And so the salamanders start to come out a little bit more. Here, actually, we'll start to see probably yellow spotted salamanders coming out. Actually, the most time I see them is when there's still snow on the ground. And then the frogs start to come out. So again, on this property with all of the wetlands, we have quite a bit of frogs. The wood frogs are the first one. And their adaptation is most frogs go underwater, right, to hibernate for the winter. These guys actually freeze. So there's an anticoagulant sort of like in their body that doesn't allow the water in their body to freeze to points, so they don't puncture anything, but they could almost freeze to like a frog popsicle. So once temperatures kind of get a little bit warm, they kind of melt and kind of come back to life, which is really cool. And so they're one of our first frogs that are out, and they're the ones with like the black mask. I think everybody, at least on the East Coast, will get wood frogs. I'm not sure if they're a West Coast frog or not. And then we start to get into our spring peepers, and everybody thinks they're birds or they're insects. So that's a really fun conversation to have with kids, is that they're actually a teeny tiny frog. So the frog itself is probably just not much bigger than like my thumb, and they have this X on the back, but they create, I think it's like 90 decibels of sound per frog or something. So it's insanely loud, and it's like a big chorus. So anybody on the East Coast probably knows exactly what I'm talking about. But yeah, so this is my favorite season, actually, is coming into spring, and getting really excited about all the changes that we get to start seeing, and more colors, because right now it just is white and brown outside and mucky, and we get really excited about the new stuff that's starting to change. So yeah, and it's great to nature journal all that stuff. It's to nature journal all those adaptations of all those really cool things. And then watching the tadpoles, right? And the vernal ponds, we can look at water levels, because we were talking about this is really cool because we have so much snow in the spring. I'm sorry, I'm going over my 2 minutes. I'll be super quick. But we have so much snow right now that we're wondering what those vernal ponds are going to look like this year, because we have so much snow right now that we haven't had in a really long time. So are they going to be sort of overflowing? Are we going to get, flooding this year? Will there be vernal ponds in other areas? And will it take longer before those dry up? So sometimes we don't have a lot of snow and they dry up very quick. So even by the end of, middle of June, there's nothing there. Or sometimes like this year, maybe this is the year that we go longer. And so again, having conversations about those species, and are they having long enough time to go through their metamorphosis before that water is kind of dried up, or, things like that. So it's gonna be really interesting this year to see kind of what's gonna happen with the amount of snow that's still in the ground, which is kind of cool. Anyway, that was cool.
I love your excitement for the spring. And I feel like that's what you're having, the questions about the timing of everything and how it all comes together, and whether there's enough time for the frogs to get what they need, et cetera. Those are really, really good conversations to have, because we might be seeing the timings of things change, or even if it has nothing to do with global climate change, maybe some years just wind up going weird. I'm remembering, like, I want to say it was like 2006. there was a group of us in school who were doing a community garden, and we'd thought that the rains had done their thing and that it was beginning to get drier weather. And so we'd begun planting for the spring going into summertime. And then sometime in mid-May, we suddenly got a cold snap that left everything on the ground completely frozen. Like we're talking, we had a pail of water and it had an inch of ice on top, and we're going, what? And then it killed a whole bunch of things that we'd been planning to keep. And it was just one of those out of gracious nowhere kind of cold snaps that we did not see coming. And so then we're left wondering, was that some sort of like a long-term thing, or was that just one of those random weird things that happens in a year? So I think that it's awesome to be able to look at timing and then cause and effect. If this pool doesn't get if this pool dries out too soon, then this happens to the frogs. And so I think that those are wonderful ways to bring in those themes, looking for the patterns, looking for the cause and effect. So it sounds like you get the kids really looking and having these deeper conversations, which is awesome. And I'm seeing a whole bunch of excitement in the chat about frog season. Does anybody else want to share just their thoughts about frog season? Just because I'm seeing so many ideas in the chat, and I'd just love to hear from you. Does anybody want to say out loud? It's okay if no, but I'm just saying, oh, Marcia, go for it, Marcia.
I'm just waving a minute. I've got students coming in, but it's really fun, and I'm on a roll over there. But it's my improv coming out, I think. So in writing and everything. But you can hear some students coming in, so I'm gonna listen. I'll turn it down, and it's so fun.
Good to see you, Marcia. I was also enjoying what you said in the chat about hopping like a frog on a frog hop.
Yeah, it's good to be seen, and hi.
Good to see you, Marcia. Did anybody else want to talk about anything to do with frog season? I can try to read some of the stuff from the chat. It's just that there's so many good ideas in the chat. I'm seeing, let's see here. I'm seeing Lisa saying that her town puts signs up and then they go help them cross the road, which is awesome. Was that newts or was that frogs? But either way, like doing that for the amphibians or doing that for different critters that have a vulnerable period, I feel like that's really important. Newt mating, searching, Aisha says, and then let's see here. And then as Marcia was saying, hopping like frog walking on a frog walk. Let's see here, doing choruses together. I think I saw that idea in there, frog chorus, sing along, being able to like noticing the different sounds that different frogs make. I'm seeing just so many wonderful ideas in the chat about ways of nature play as well, not just nature journaling, but nature playing, which can just be so wonderful to get into the feeling of spring. Does anybody else like to watch and see about plants and see not only which buds form on the tree and then whether the buds turn into flowers first or leaves first or both at once? Does anybody else like to draw seedlings as they come out of the ground and then see how the seedlings go and like who they become when they get older? That can be kind of fun to do if you're a gardener and you like, I see Aisha and Kate and some others like raising their hands and nodding. And one thing I found that's fun is to do that if you're a gardener. And then that way you begin to learn in advance, this seedling equals this plant. And so then you know which plants to leave alone. And then if you're trying to get a jump on the weeding, then you can pick out those. But it can also be fun to see the seedlings that look nothing like their adult forms. And if you have a kid you're showing that with as well, then they're kind of, or even an adult, then they're just kind of like, wait, what? That becomes that? And it can be fun in the same way for the bugs or for other life that goes through huge metamorphosis, and then you're kind of going, wait, how? So that can be kind of a fun thing to look at with some wonder. And yeah, I agree with you, Aisha, getting to know those first two cotyledons, because the cotyledons will have so many different fun shapes. And does anybody have any other ideas for spring? I wanted to give folks a chance to share any more of those. And if not, then I wanted us to go on to another question, which is, are there any safety concerns when you're taking people out during spring? Because I know we talked about that for summer, fall, and for winter. So I wanted to make sure we do that for spring as well. Any ideas for spring activities before we move on? I'm not seeing any. So any ideas about spring safety? Lisa saying thin, weaker ice. Aisha saying slippery mud. Okay, I see Billie Jo and then Kate.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, so ice is a big one here, and also just being wet. So everything is melting, everything is kind of mucky, or it's starting to rain. And even though the day might be a little bit warmer, we still have to be really concerned with things like hypothermia. So, but then on the opposite side, we can, if it's really warm, we can still be worried about dehydration. So just not thinking like just because the temperatures aren't super cold, that kids can't get cold or get hypothermia, because it can still happen. So spring is that transition. And here in Ontario, we could have 2 weeks of really hot weather followed up by a day of snow. So you just have to be sort of on your toes and be prepared with layers. And here at the field centers, like we have like jackets, and we have extra boots, and we have extra socks and things like that to sort of help kids transition through that if they get wet or things like that. So those would be my big ones, is just weather and the temperature, just watching.
Awesome. Thank you, Billie Jo. And I saw Kate's hand, and then I also saw Lisa and Amy mentioning some things into the chat. If either of you two wanted to share out loud too, I welcome you to. But if not, I'll read what you said too. So let's go to you, Kate.
Just real quick, I just wanted to share just like again, the rate of change, but the rate of change during the span of a day can be really intense too. And so then you can have like these sudden storms that come up. I don't know if that's other places, but you just have, so you go out, it seems like this beautiful day, and then the wind whips up, and then all of a sudden it's like cold and rainy. And so just being really prepared for the full range of temperatures within the single spring day because of that tug of war. Again, like we were in Japan and we experienced that, and it just, so bringing the layers and bringing, a rain jacket wherever you go. And then really different weather apps are better at kind of identifying when you might have a sudden precipitation happening in the middle of the day, or a sudden change. If you just look at the weather for the entire day, it's an average. It's actually kind of really fascinating how they calculate that. They're like, oh, it's a 90% chance of rain, but that's at some point during the day. And it doesn't necessarily tell you at what point during the day and how much rain too. Is it going to be this pouring, drenching rain? Is it going to just be this gentle drizzle that's just going to be pleasant? And same thing with wind. Wind can just change so drastically during the day. Since I started doing some more water and wind sports, I realized like how really profound it can be from like an hour to hour. And so really being prepared for like, not just saying like walking outside, oh, it's this beautiful spring day. If you're going to be going for a long time, really being prepared for how that can really shift.
Those are some really great points, Kate, that to be really mindful about how much of a shift that there can be. I really appreciate you and Billie Jo bringing up like the weather shifts and being aware of those. I see Aisha raising her hand. And then I also saw some really great things in the chat that Amy was sharing. Here, I'm gonna spotlight you, Aisha.
Oh, hey. Am I unmuted? I think so. Hey, I just realized, I don't know that this is actually safety related. Safety in spring. I already said about slippery mud and winds and stuff, but the other thing I found myself thinking about is in spring in particular, how fast things change just even on the land, because I'm leading a walk in maybe 1 or 2 weeks, and it's a botany class rather than nature journaling class. But it's just like, we all scope out sites before we go. And I'm like, because of the timing, I literally need to scope it out like the day before. So I know which plants I'm focusing on and which ones I just, and we always have to be prepared for the unexpected. But I feel like especially this time of year, certain things may, like last year, they hadn't even opened yet. And then changed my plan. And then 3 days later I got there and I was like, oh, it is open. So just for my own preparation, it's just kind of like, yeah, if I can manage just the day before is more likely to help me know where I'm going to guide everybody as best as I can. So I was just going to say that.
That is a really good call, Aisha, to double check in advance to see that like what to expect of the area that you're planning to take people in. Like you said, if it's even still open, especially if I know that for us in the Bay Area, we've been getting extreme weather with the raining and everything else, and some areas have been
my
flooded.
God, my trail might not even be open. That's a really good point, Yvea. And the roads have been closed out to that whole area as well. I was not able to go out 2 weeks ago. Trees are coming down faster, really fast. So yeah, that'll be also a thing.
Exactly. For those,
yeah, setting it up so that people can reach you at the last minute, even more so than usual.
Definitely, so people can
so that you can tell them and just say we've moved locations, or it's not happening because of something happened on the trail. Yeah,
definitely. For those who we've been having this drought. Speaking of change, we've been having this drought in California for the last, I don't even know how many years at this point. And one of the effects of the drought is that the trees are a bit weaker. And so now that we've been getting extreme amounts of rain, pardon my phone, like Jack says, quiet you. And so now that we've been getting extreme amounts of rain, it's been, and winds to accompany the rains, then it's been causing a lot of trees coming down because the trees' roots aren't nearly as strong as they used to be. And so they don't have as good a grip on the soil. So we've got trees coming down, limbs coming down, we've got flooding. There are some areas in the Bay Area where it stays flooded. We've got electricity going out all over the state. It's been pretty dramatic.
And it's actually, now you say that, just even in terms of safety, like even if the actual day is not rainy, but it looks like there might be winds. Right now, it's just, I know other friends canceling walks because it's just too risky of limbs coming down the very next day after a big storm. Or, you're on your way home and by then the road has closed because a tree has come down. I've never seen anything like this. But I know that's how it's going for every place now. So yeah, I'm just learning. I feel like I was talking to somebody else, and just to share this is like, I feel like we need to get more comfortable with changing plans and canceling, and not just being like, this is what we were set to do outdoors. And it's just like, we can't, and a lot of us have been outdoor educators for so much of our life, and it's very hard to make that shift. And I'm watching friends of mine who've been in that world too, local naturalists who are used to going out and struggling with that mindset of like, we have to be a bit more adaptable to this and flexible, and just be like, it's not happening. Sorry, there's a bunch of disappointed people. We're trying to keep you safe. There was like something somebody else went to, and I was just like, I would just say I didn't want to be on the road myself, and I didn't want them to be on the roads. There's like so many ways to come at it. And I don't know, I think there might be some modeling around this that we'll have to start doing, like, hey, and we learned a bit of it in the pandemic, and then I feel like somehow everybody tried to go back to, well, if it's on the calendar, it has to happen. And I was like, did we not learn that we're actually fine if it doesn't happen?
Yeah.
So just throwing that thought out.
Being flexible is very important. Both you and Eleni are saying. And then also I appreciate what you were saying about communication needing to be really make it accessible for people to find you and be able to talk to you and be able to communicate when there's a huge change. And that's difficult because we all rely on such different communication systems. Some folks may not be able to access internet very well, especially if the power's out.
Totally. If the power is out. Exactly. I mean, even the leader of it may have no power and may not be able to tell anybody anything, let alone the attendees. So yeah, taking that into account more. Yeah. And I was also this just to sort of, this is a bit of a side angle, but as long as we're on this. I've been thinking recently, especially seeing my county naturalist friends struggle, you know, and I don't know if anybody else has this. They get into their schedule like, and we're going to do the frog walk here, and then this month, and we had to get the date, and then we're going to do this walk. And, you know, we're watching everything change, and you can't guarantee that March 25th or April 8th is when the frogs will be calling. And I'm wondering if she will loosen up, like we're doing this thing and we'll see what we see, as opposed to this is specifically an amphibian walk. This is specifically dragonflies in June, because she started missing the mark more. It's hard. It's getting harder and harder to know. And I'm wondering if a lot of us will have to shift how we advertise outings, especially if it's not a plant, which will probably be there, but you can't guarantee that it'll be blooming or in fruit.
That might be a good topic to get into deeper at another educators forum, is to talk about how we shift in the times of our phenomenon or our safety shifting. So let me, let's make a note of that for the chat, to make that a future topic.
Okay.
Shifting, because
yeah, I know it doesn't quite fit here, sorry.
No. I also want to make sure that we get to go more deeply into that, because I'm thinking that that is a good conversation to get more deeply into. So shifting arraignments in times of shifting safety and phenomena. Would you say that that is accurate, what you were saying?
Yes.
Sure. Okay, good. I want to make sure of that. So thank you for that. And then also, yeah, for bringing that topic up about shifting and being able to do that, especially in light of safety. A couple other spring things I'd like to read, and then I'll call on Jim, is I saw Amy Sides had said in the chat. Is it okay if I read it, Amy?
Yeah, I mean, I've got a few things to add to that if you wanted.
Let me have you go, because you said that a bit ago in the chat, and I want to make sure. Go ahead.
Okay, well, I was just going to say there's things that you know, that we're aware of for at least 3 seasons here that, you know, during the winter they're not a problem, so we've kind of, you know, let our memory lapse on them. But like snakes really love to come out and sun themselves in on the warm days in the spring here, and they're the same color as the leaves, the dead leaves that are still on the ground a lot of the time. And if you're not thinking about where you step because you've forgotten for the last few months, you haven't had to think about it, then you might step on one, which could hurt you, and it will probably hurt the snake. And then also like stinging insects, you know, not a problem here when it gets cooler, but, you know, now they're starting to come out again, and just, you know, watch where you put your fingers and toes, and, you know, and some people get kind of squeamish and, you know, lose their heads when a bumblebee or a wasp starts flying around. Whereas I feel like in the fall, they do it less because they've been flying around all summer, you know, and so they've kind of, you know, their senses have gotten a little more accustomed to them. But in the spring, it's like, oh, I forgot those things exist. And they start panicking again.
That's a really good point. Sometimes we don't maybe think about, oh, sorry, I did not mean to do that, sorry. Like I like that to be aware of things that we haven't maybe thought about because we haven't had to think about them for quite a while. So that's a good caveat there. And I think that's why it winds up becoming so important that we keep notes in our nature journals over time, is because then we look back. It'd be good if we even had an alert page that says, alert, beginning of spring, look out for this. And then every year we're like, oh, that's right.
True, very true. Yeah.
That could help. Thank you for that, Amy. Especially, yeah, that's definitely like a more immediate threat that we might have to worry about, especially if any of our participants have allergies. So definitely something to be very aware of. And then I'm seeing that Billie Jo is also mentioning ticks. And Kate Ryder saying that she dug up a yellow jacket nest once in the spring as a kid. Ah. That sounds scary. I'm seeing Jim's hand, so I'm gonna spotlight you now. Is that okay?
Yeah, it was just a quick comment. It's not really a safety issue, but you're talking about timing, and It's just a story that happened actually to a friend of mine. It was an Audubon, state Audubon meeting. So there were a lot of people there, conference, they'll go to Albany or someplace. And one of the events was a bird walk in the morning. So the person who organized it was like, okay, we'll have it the same time we did last year. That worked out great. We'll go out at dawn. And it turned out that they had it a week ahead or later, I'm not sure which. And daylight savings time had changed, and they were all out standing in the dark for an hour waiting for it to get light. So it's probably nothing anyone would really have to worry about too much unless you're doing a birding trip, but it's there. I thought it was a fun story.
I can appreciate that, and also agree that daylight savings is definitely something to be aware of, especially because, and both in person, but then also if you're doing like an online thing with somebody, if you're doing online teaching, then daylight savings might change at different weeks for people. Like, for example, I know that the other day there was this meeting that some of us were having with somebody who lived in Arizona, and Arizona's time, they thought that it had changed, but Arizona's time was at the same as somebody else's. And so then people were showing up an hour early, and then it's the same thing when you have international guests, that their daylight savings might change at different times. Or if you have international guests who live in the other hemisphere, then they might actually wind up jumping closer to your time. And it's not consistent across the world. So that's a really good point, Jim, to remember about daylight savings. Thank you. I'm going to go back to our gallery view. And is there any other either safety or activities that anybody else wants to share? I want to make sure that folks get a chance to say anything that they would like, or any closing thoughts. I'm thinking that this is it for today, unless anybody else has any thoughts. What do you think, Billie Jo? All good? Okay. In that case, if there's no other closing thoughts, I see Aisha waving, I see folks waving. In that case, we wish you a safe and very happy spring. Oh, wait, I'm seeing Kate Ryder is, sorry, I apologize, I just saw. Kate Ryder is wanting Amy to talk more about star chart. Go for it, Amy. Sorry.
All right, oh, let me grab one real quick. When you have a star chart, it shows you like the time of day that you are, oh gosh, I'm gonna have to turn off my background. Oops. Okay, well that might work. It shows you the time of day that you are okay, there we go. Shows the time of day that you are looking at the chart. Like, for example, if it's February and it's, say, 8 p.m. in February, you would want to move it over here. But if it's, say, standard time, then you might have to adjust it, 1 hour one way or the other. Actually, hang on. I have a different star chart. This is the one I was using with the kids. This is a free download from Sky and Telescope magazine, if y'all want it. But it has, let's see, I'm reading it backwards. I hope it's forward for y'all. Standard time and daylight savings time. And so you match up the date with the time of day. And so it's going to be different depending on what time of year it is. Like if it's daylight savings time, you would look at the yellow times. And if it's standard time, you would look at the white times. So 2 weeks ago, it was like the Friday before the time change. And I said, okay, well, right now you're going to use the white ones. But then in 2 days, like Sunday evening, you would start using the yellow ones. So it was just, because I started with my lesson, oh, you do this. I'm like, no, wait, the time's changing. So had to consider that. So definitely something to consider when you're teaching.
Thank you for that. That's really fun. being able to, like, especially because we talk about being able to see certain constellations better during the year than others, and so that could really foster an appreciation for that. Is that star chart location specific?
The one from Sky and Telescope doesn't seem to be, but this one that is a little more professional and made out of plastic, this is for latitudes 30 to 40 degrees, and they make them for other latitudes as well. So like I'm at North 33 here in Birmingham, Alabama, but like, for example, Billie Jo would want one that's for higher latitudes.
That is really cool. I love latitude specific.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's see, what brand is the plastic one? It says David Chandler Company, davidchandler.com, CHANDLER.
Like that?
Yes.
Excellent.
Mm-hmm.
I love that it's latitude specific. Plus, you just gave me a fun question to ask. Like, you know how we do the where are you calling in from? It'd be fun to say, what latitude are you at sometime?
That would be fun. Definitely.
That is very cool. Thank you for sharing those resources with us.
Sure.
Did you or anybody else have anything else that you wanted to add? Nope, I'm not seeing anything. In that case, I wish you all a safe and joyful spring with a lot of ideas of things to investigate and a lot of wonder to share with the people around you. And we'll see you next week, and Jack will be back at the helm. So see you then.